In the old brick building on Orchard and 3rd, the hallways carried stories. The radiator talked in hisses, the floors remembered every footfall, and the stairwell smelled faintly of laundry soap and someone's eternal cinnamon habit. Natalie, who had just turned 30 last spring and taught art to 5th graders at the public school down the block, lived in 3B and knew all of it by heart. She also knew, without ever really knowing, that 3C belonged to a woman named Esfalif. The mailboxes and the spare tote hung on the doorknob were any indication. She knew the soft wheeze of the lock turning and the way a laugh, low and surprised, would sometimes spill into the landing before the door clicked shut. On a Tuesday in late October, the first cold had slipped into the city. Natalie was coming home balancing a portfolio under one arm and a paper bag with clementines under the other, when she almost tripped over a long cardboard package lounging like a cat in front of her door. Her name was on the sticker, but the address said 3C. She nudged it with her boot and sighed. The delivery people had the building's labels memorized incorrectly. Like a pop quiz they'd never studied for it. She set the clementines on the hall table, knocked on 3C, and smoothed a smear of dried paint off her thumb. The bolt slid, slow. The door opened to a woman with a mess of auburn hair gathered in a knot and the kind of eyes that made you think of city parks after rain. Bright, patient, and a little mischievous. She wore a gray sweatshirt dusted with what looked like flour, sleeves pushed to her elbows, and a copper ring that tightened and loosened on her thumb as if it were listening. "Hi," the woman said, smiling from somewhere both shy and certain. "Hi," Natalie echoed, and tried not to stare. "I think this is yours. The building strikes again." The woman leaned into the doorway and peered at the label. "Scarlett," she said, tapping the corner where her name lived. "That's me." "Thank you, Scarlett." It suited the auburn knot and the copper ring, the warmth of cinnamon that was definitely coming from inside. Natalie swallowed a grin she could feel wobbling onto her mouth. "I'm Natalie. I'm across the hall, right?" Scarlett's face shifted into recognition, as if a puzzle piece that had been refusing to budge suddenly clicked. "We've been waving at each other for, what, a year?" "2," Natalie said. "At least." Scarlett laughed that low, surprised laugh. It spilled out just as the overhead hall light gave a shudder, a weary blink, and died. The building sighed in sympathy. Somewhere, a unit groaned like a whale. Natalie's phone lit up like a startled fish in her pocket. "Power's out," Scarlett said, voice skimming the dark. "Seems like it." Natalie's eyes adjusted. The diffuse evening creeping around the stairwell window painted Scarlett in soft grays. "I'm going to guess the boiler's having a mood, or the universe wanted to make our introduction more dramatic." Scarlett stepped back, the shape of her moving in shadow. "I've got candles. Come in for a minute. It's either that or we play hallway ghosts." Natalie hesitated, a lifetime of caution arguing with an instinct that felt older and simpler. The hallway was a thin, chilly place. Scarlett's apartment promised light. "Candles win," she said. Inside 3C, the first thing Natalie noticed was warmth, the kind that rises from ovens and good intentions. The second thing was how alive it felt. Plants in mismatched pots crowding the windowsill, a string of postcards clipped along one wall, a stack of cookbooks anchoring a short bookshelf, a bowl dusted with flour, and a clean kitchen towel draped, like a blanket over whatever slept inside. The wind nudged the window. The apartment returned the favor by smelling even more like cinnamon. "Sorry about the mess," Scarlett said, though nothing was messy. She struck a match, one candle found, the next, then the next, until the room was lit like it had a low, secret sun. "I had a dough on its second proof," and then she gestured at the ceiling. "Darkness. It happens. I'm a baker. Mornings are usually my thing." Natalie blinked. "That explains ... everything." She half-laughed. "A cinnamon that leaks into the hall on Sunday mornings. The way I'm occasionally woken up by what I can only describe as joy in the shape of a smell." "That's the official term," Scarlett said, mouth crooked. "Joy in Nashaput. And you, I always see you with that big folder. I'm guessing art, or law." "Art, thank God," Natalie said. "I teach 5th graders who could negotiate us out of a war if you promised them extra glitter." Scarlett's eyes warmed. "That's heroic." "It's sticky," Natalie said, but in a noble way. A battery-powered radio on the counter coughed itself to life when Scarlett turned its dial. An old jazz station drifted soft horns into the room. Natalie stood there, absorbing the details. the way Scarlett's hair refused to be contained by the knot, the faint dusting of flour across her wrists like a secret snowfall, the confidence of someone who'd been up before dawn enough times to wrangle a day into shape. "I've been meaning to introduce myself properly," Scarlett said, leaning a hip against the counter. "I'm always running. Newish to the building." 2 years is still newish, right? "I think so," Natalie said. And, because the storm-softened mood asked for honesty, added, "I moved here after a breakup. The kind where all your mugs suddenly look like old friends who chose sides." Scarlett's smile gentled. "I know that one. I moved here after my father got sick. He's better now, or trying to be." The city felt like a place that would forgive a messy restart. Natalie nodded, the kind of nod that lives at the height of your throat. "Well, welcome to the messy part of the building where the light flickers on a schedule no one agreed to." "Thank you," Scarlett said. "Mock formal, I accept." They stood companionably in the glow. Conversation drifted to the street, outside, to the way the corner bodega guy knew everyone's name and everyone's fruit preference, to the pigeon that had decided ownership of the fire escape last spring. The storm pushed its shoulder against the windows. Natalie felt, inexplicably, like she'd come in from the weather. "Do you want a clementine?" she asked suddenly, remembering the paper bag abandoned in the hall. "I left them outside like a negligent parent." Scarlett laughed and went with her to rescue them. In the flashlight beam, their fingers brushed on the handle. It was nothing, just a human accident. But the small flash ran up Natalie's arm like a line drawn by a sure hand. Back inside, Scarlett rolled a clementine between her palms to loosen the skin and passed it to Natalie. "Trade me a segment for your number," she said, pretending to bargain, "in case the power goes out again and I need an art teacher to label my flowers." Natalie's smile snuck up on her. "You plan ahead. I like that." She rattled off her number, watched Scarlett type it in with flower-soft fingers. She saved Scarlett's contact as Scarlett 3C, then changed it to Scarlet Cinnamon, then changed it back before she could be ridiculous. "Do you go up to the roof?" Scarlett asked after a beat. "When the power's out, the city's quieter. It becomes this other place. Less steel, more sky." "Sometimes," Natalie said. "Only if someone else is there." "That's convenient," Scarlett said, fetching 2 sweaters from a chair and offering one. "There's someone else here now." They climbed the final flight by phone light, the stairwell a spine up the back of the building. The roof door protested like an old friend getting off the couch. Outside, the neighborhood dulled itself. Without the usual blaze of windows, the city wore a softer face. The clouds were low and moving. The air snapped clean. They leaned against the parapet, shoulder to shoulder, but not touching, their breaths ghosting white. Somewhere, a siren threaded needle slow through the dark. Closer, someone laughed deep and relieved on another rooftop. Scarlett tipped her face up. The candle warmth had followed them in the way a feeling does. "It's quieter," Natalie said. "It's braver," Scarlett said, and turned to look at her. "Or maybe it's just that everything honest feels a little louder in the dark." Natalie met her gaze and felt that bright, steady thing again, recognition, maybe, or the clear knowledge that across the hall had always been closer than she'd let herself notice. The city hummed below them. The power would come back. Of course it would. Buff. She didn't mind, for once, the waiting. The morning after the blackout, Natalie woke to the soft percussion of rain and the chime of a text. "Unknown. Did you survive the night without your noble glitter army?" "Unknown." Scarlett from across the hall. "In case you haven't saved my number as something ridiculous yet." Natalie smiled into her pillow, hair a wild crown in the half-light. She typed back, thumbs slipping into the familiar rhythm of mild teasing. "Natalie, barely. My mugs are staging a coup. Natalie, are you the reason the hallway smells like heaven again?" A minute later, there was a light knock. When Natalie opened her door, the hall was full of quiet and the smell of butter. On the mat sat a small paper bag tied with kitchen twine and a sticky note. 43B. May it fix any mutinous crockery. Inside, a still warm cinnamon roll, its spirals glossy with glaze. Natalie pressed her hands to the sides of the bag, absorbing the radiated comfort as if it could seep into bone, and texted before she tasted. "Natalie. It's entirely unfair to weaponize pastry this early. Scarlett, the defense rests. Scarlett, if you want to return fire, leave your front door cracked later. I'm testing a rosemary olive bread and maybe." Also, the boundaries of how many plants one apartment can legally hold. School moved like a familiar song, that decade voices rising on the choruses, a dozen small crises, a bent paintbrush, a friendship flare up, someone's glitter catastrophically colliding with someone else's lunchbox folded into the verses. At lunch, while the teachers traded leftovers and recapped the last-minute Halloween costume emergencies, Natalie thought about the way Scarlett's kitchen had been all warm edges in the dark. She thought about the copper ring sliding along, a thumb, about a laugh that had found the room like a map. She texted again, after final bell, on the walk home. Leaves combed the sidewalks into tidy drifts. The sky was a hard blue you only got in November, once the trees had stopped pretending. She passed the bodega and Mr. Khan called out, "Art teacher, your clementines were good luck in the storm." Yes, she added another bag to her arm, just in case fate needed extra insurance. Scarlett's door was cracked, as promised. Natalie tapped it and peered in. The sound of a low playlist drifted piano, something yearning but content. Scarlett emerged from the kitchen with a tea towel over one shoulder and a smear of olive oil on her forearm. "You obey directions," Scarlett said, pleased, taking the clementines. "Very kind of you." "I'm a teacher," Natalie said. "We live for clear expectations." She followed Scarlett in, pausing in the doorway as if she needed the threshold to catch her breath. The apartment looked different in daylight. Smaller, somehow, but honeyed with it. On the windowsill, Basil and Mint elbowed each other like siblings in a shared seat. A wooden peel leaned against the oven. A small chalkboard by the bathroom door listed a week's projects in slanted handwriting. "Croissants, olive loaves, ginger snaps. Call Dad." "Do you do all this here?" Natalie asked, gesturing at the bread. The tidy rows of cooling racks, like a small metallic skyline. "I test at home, deliver to the shop before dawn, then spend the day doing the real thing there," Scarlett said, making a face. "Which means I'm chronically flour-dusted, and my friends always want to meet for drinks when I'm in bed by 9. "I'll adjust," Natalie said, then wanted to swallow the words back before they could be interpreted as anything too bold. But Scarlett only tilted her head, that amused recognition surfacing again. "Will you?" she asked softly, but didn't press. She lifted the tea towel to reveal the rosemary olive loaf. The crust sang when she tapped it, a faint crackle that made the room feel like it was leaning in. Taste. They ate in companionable silence, olive bright, rosemary shadowed. The bread still held the oven's warmth like a secret. Natalie found herself watching Scarlett's hands, confident, steady, generous, then looked away, busying herself with the clementines as if peeling citrus were a complicated art form. "These are perfect," Scarlett said, cupping a segment to her mouth. "If you ever need a recommendation for a local grove, I've got a guy." "You have a clementine guy." "I have a produce guy, a flower guy, a honey lady, a guy who sells only cheese from sheep that look at the ocean. It's a network. Do you want to see the bakery sometime? Before the day gets loud, we open at 6, but if you come early, it's just the ovens talking." Natalie's yes was immediate and too eager. She softened it with a laugh. "If there's coffee." "Always," Scarlett said, "and I'll give you the good apron." Next morning Natalie's alarm split the dark in two. She dressed by the streetlights scatter, pulling a sweater over sleep hair, sneaking out like a teenager. The city that early was its own country. Dog walkers in knit hats, delivery trucks shouldering awake, a jogger breathing steam. The bakery glowed warm in the gray. A bell threaded their entry onto the air. Scarlett, already there, had her hair in a looser knot than usual, like the morning hadn't quite finished asking questions of it. She looked up and grinned in a way that felt private, like a secret shared between the first cup of coffee and the second. "Welcome to the part of day civilization ignores," she said, handing over a mug. "You can stand here and taste this," she added, slicing a sliver of something custardy and miraculous. "Or you can help me watch the croissants like a hawk while I pretend folding butter into dough isn't a religious experience. Your call." Natalie leaned against the counter, the air a soft cloud of flour. There was something about watching someone do the thing they were good at that made the world more honest. Scarlett moved like the kitchen was an answer she'd been waiting to ask. Her laugh when a stubborn dough finally acquiesced was as satisfying as the first kiss of heat on cold hands. Later, back in the regular morning, the whole city suddenly awake and pretending it had been all along. They walked the 3 blocks home, with a paper bag swinging between them. Their shoulders bumped once, and then again, the second time, deliberate, neither of them saying so. In the hallway, the radiator sighed, as if trying to gossip. Natalie paused with her key. Saturday, Scarlett said. The market's good then. If you're free, I can introduce you to sheep who look at the ocean. I am very free, Natalie said, then corrected herself, unsmoothing her voice. Yes, Saturday. It rained on Saturday, a steady curtain that made the tents at the market look like small, determined ships. Scarlett took Natalie's sleeve, in a casually careful way, when the sidewalk turned slick, and they navigated the aisles of persimmons and dark greens, the smell of wet earth and coffee threading everything. Scarlett made everyone smile. She introduced Natalie as if she had been there all along. This is Natalie. She's the one who believes in extra glitter as a diplomatic strategy. And Natalie watched people's faces open like umbrellas. They stood under the honey tent, listening to the beekeeper talk about seasonal moods, about how bees recalibrate after storms. Scarlett's phone buzzed on the table, lighting up with a name Natalie didn't recognize. Scarlett glanced, thumb hovering, then set it down face down. You can, Natalie began. It's my dad, Scarlett said. He gets lonely on Saturdays. He's better, she added, quick, as if forestalling worry. But better is still a path. You know. I know, Natalie said. She did. Better was a weather system all its own. On the walk back, the rain lifted. A pale strip of sky unrolled over the rooftops. They climbed to the roof with paper cups of soup, sat side by side on the low wall, steam curling from the lids like small stars. We keep finding our way up here, Scarlett said. It's our unofficial lease, Natalie said. Kitchen privileges and rooftop rights. Add a clause about emergency clementines, Scarlett said. She turned her face toward Natalie, hair damp, eyes clear. And one about neighbors allowed to become friends. Natalie nodded, heat shifting under her ribs like a small, delighted animal. That seems fair. Below them, a siren stitched itself through the city and vanished. A dog barked on the next building over, offended by nothing. Scarlett bumped her shoulder, and Natalie didn't pretend not to lean back. In the thin, tentative light, a line moved between them, invisible but as certain as a door left slightly open. The forecast tried to be dramatic about it, alerts, in all caps. Headlines talking about the season's first, but when the snow finally arrived, it did so like a thought. Flakes drifted past the stairwell window on their own slow business, undecided, then more of them joined, and the city's edges softened, like a pencil line touched by a wet thumb. Natalie woke to the quiet that snow brings, the kind that pads the world and makes you forgive it. Down the hall, a door clicked. A text followed. Scarlet cinnamon. Do you believe in black pepper in ginger snaps, or is that heresy? Natalie. I believe, encouraged. 10 minutes later, she was in Scarlett's kitchen, hair tucked into a messy braid, snow still stargazing her shoulders. The apartment wore winter-well candles in glass jars. A kettle clicking itself awake. Plants looking smug about being indoors. Scarlett lined a tray with rounds of dough and lifted one to Natalie. Taste, yes or no? The cookie was crisp at the edge, soft inside, with a whisper of pepper. Right after the ginger said its piece. It felt like a secret and a dare. Absolutely yes, Natalie said, eyes widening. It's ginger with a spine. Scarlett looked pleased in a way that reached her eyes and stayed there. Good. I'm bringing some to your winter showcase. She gestured at a stack of boxes by the door. Your principal approved the bribery. Natalie groaned. She probably did. We've been up to our ears in papaya, MCH, and enthusiasm. If there are cookies, there will be cooperation. Teacher calculus, Scarlett said, approving. All that week, their doors opened and closed in a kind of choreography. Natalie, in the hall with a bundle of construction paper antlers, Scarlett with a crate of oranges for a test cake. They ate soup on the stairs when the elevator decided to analyze its life choices. Midweek, and made a small ritual of the mailbox. Package had been misdelivered. The finder left it wrapped in brown paper with a doodled hint of its contents. Natalie drew a cartoon of a croissant so lopsided it would have made a French grandmother faint. Scarlett taped it to her fridge like art. On the night of the showcase, the school felt like a ship launching. Paper lanterns bobbed like moons along the hallway, and the multipurpose room had been coaxed into a gallery with butcher paper and twine. Parents in puffy coats took off their hats and tried not to cry at clay owls. The fifth graders stood by their paintings, bravely pretending not to care if you stopped to admire them. Scarlett arrived with the cookies and a thermos of hot cocoa. So rich it made everyone a little kinder. She wore a dark sweater and a red, ear-warming headband, and for a second, when Natalie saw her in the doorway with snow handwriting the shoulders, every other person in the room fuzzed out like background noise. Delivery person, Scarlett said, bumping her hip against the tables as she set down the boxes. An unofficial appreciator of all things made by small humans. Natalie laughed, grateful for the way Scarlett read the room without a map. How she bent to a wary kid's level to say, "Tell me about this color." A line of shy artists formed in her orbit. Scarlett's praise landed like a well-aimed light. Midway through, Scarlett's phone lit up. She glanced, mouth pressed. "It's my dad," she said softly. "I'll just 2 minutes." Natalie watched her slip out to the hallway, a crescent moon moving away. She kept smiling for a mother who wanted assurance about watercolor permanence, but the world's focus shifted until it clicked again when Scarlett returned, cheeks washed pale. "Okay?" Natalie asked, low. "He's fine," Scarlett said, then shook her head. "He's lonely. He wanted to know what time I was coming by, even though we talked this morning." The chemo fog took his calendar and hid it somewhere. "He can feel but not name." She exhaled. "He's better, but better has holes." Natalie reached without thinking and placed a hand over Scarlett's on the edge of the table. Flower lived under her nails like an old friend. "You're doing so much," she said. "It's allowed to be hard." Scarlett's mouth tilted, not quite a smile. "When I was little and we made bread, he'd call the warm place where the dough rose the quiet. Let's put it in the quiet. He'd say, like it was a room inside the world. I keep trying to find that room for him now." Natalie squeezed, feeling the flare of something fiercely tender. "Then we'll find it," she said, "even if we have to build it out of cocoa and cookies and a fifth-grade orchestra that knows only 5 notes. They stood like that for a beat, the room's noise weaving around them. A teacher popped up at Scarlett's elbow, then, arms full of cups. "Is the cookie table ready for replenishment?" she whispered. "Double quotes always," Scarlett said, clearing her throat. She slipped her hand free with a soft, apologetic drag, and Natalie let it go with a flutter she told herself was entirely normal, oxygen-related behavior. After the last lantern sputtered and the janitor cheerfully mourned glitter in the custodial closet, they walked home through snow that had decided to take itself seriously. Their boots made that excellent squeak. Cars wore soft hats. The city leaned in. "Thank you for coming," Natalie said. "Thank you for letting me," Scarlett said. "It's a good kind of noise." On the third-floor landing, heat rose like a promise through the building's pipes. Scarlett paused with her key, looking at Natalie like she was memorizing something about the set of her shoulders, the winter flush on her cheekbones. "I could," Scarlett began, then stopped. "Do you want to come over? I have soup I was saving for." She tilted the phone in her palm. "But I can see him in the morning. We'll FaceTime. He'll like the snow." "Soup is my love language," Natalie said, before she could call it something else. In the apartment, they shed coats and boots at the door as if they'd known all their lives how to leave the weather outside. Scarlett ladled soup into bowls. Steam rose in small ghosts. They sat cross-legged on the rug, 2 iterations of the same contentment, tired, warmed, aware of the line between them growing brighter, and not minding the brightness. Scarlett told a story about her dad once entering a pie contest with a savory tart he swore counted because life was better when categories misbehaved. Natalie told a story about a student who painted the same blue on 20 sheets of paper and called it a study of sky moods, and how all the adults teased until the kids said, with a scientist's dignity, "Would you prefer I call it blue?" And everyone apologized with cupcakes. The room felt like it had found the quiet outside. The snow drew a false dawn from the streetlights. Scarlett set her empty bowl aside. Her ring traced the rim absently. "There's a clause we haven't added to our rooftop contract," she said, voice almost teasing, but threadbare at the edges with something like courage. Natalie asked, heart lifting its head. "The one about neighbors allowed to become more than friends." Scarlett met her gaze and didn't look away. "I like you in a way that doesn't feel particularly neighborly." Natalie laughed, a release, as much as amusement. "Good," she said, because truth felt so much better when it didn't have to tiptoe. "I like you that way too." They didn't rush. The knowing itself filled the room, broadened their shoulders, made everything else seem less urgent. They sat, and the building clicked and hummed. And finally Scarlett reached out, fingers brushing a curl that had escaped Natalie's braid. Her hand hovered, A question asked in the language of touch. Natalie answered by closing the small space. The kiss, when it came, was the opposite of a surprise. It felt like the way the first snow feels when you wake and the world you already live in is suddenly the same but softer, gentle, certain, a yes that had been waiting at the door and was finally let in. They separated with the kind of smile that has nowhere to go but forward. "Hi," Scarlett said, soft, like she was meeting Natalie in every room at once. "Hi," Natalie returned, a little breathless, a little braver. "We should probably amend the contract in writing." "On the chalkboard," Scarlett said solemnly. "Under call Dad." They laughed. They didn't make any grand plans, and they didn't need to make any promises bigger than the next morning. Scarlett showed Natalie the old photo on her phone, of a younger him with flour on his nose and his hands on a child's shoulders at a kitchen table, both of them making a glorious mess. Natalie showed Scarlett a picture of a crooked owl that won Best in Show because it made an entire auditorium glow. Later, the snow slowed to a patient drift. The radiators sighed themselves into sleep. Natalie walked the small distance home with her coat hanging open and the new warmth following, the hallway lit by the kind of light that believes in beginnings. She paused at her door, turned, and saw Scarlett still in hers, a silhouette in candlelight, a hand lifted in a promise they had already started to keep. Morning threaded itself through the blinds like patient gold. Natalie woke to the domestic strangeness of joy. How it makes everything familiar feel a little new. How even the radiator's gossip sounded conspiratorial. She checked her phone and found a photo, Scarlett's chalkboard, a neat addition beneath called Dad. Rooftop contract, emergency clementines, neighbors, allowed to become more than friends. Soup is a language below it, a text, Scarlett Cinnamon, good morning, more dash than dash neighbor. Natalie, good morning, you early morning miracle. They met in the hall in socks, hair, sleep must, the thin distance of the threshold, suddenly, the sweetest road. The kiss they shared was small and sure, a proof of concept, a thing they didn't have to narrate. Then the day tugged on their sleeves. Scarlett shrugged into a coat that had flour ground into the cuffs and headed for the bakery. Natalie tugged her curls into something the fifth graders wouldn't try to emulate with glue. Days took on a new rhythm, a syncopation they barely had to conduct. A sticky note on Natalie's door. There's a container in your fridge labeled Tuesday that is actually Wednesday. Sorry, in advance. A paper bag on Scarlett's doormat. Clementines for courage in block letters. A heart Natalie colored in with a highlighter, because that's what was in her tote. They developed a habit of pausing at the middle of the hallway, like the space itself was a third. Small home checking in, trading updates, pressing a quick kiss into the wool of a scarf. One Wednesday before sunrise, the phone call came. Number lit up on Natalie's screen, but it was not Scarlett at first. It was the wind of her breath. "He fell," she said, when she could shape the air into words. "Nothing broken. The neighbor got him up, but he sounded scared. I need to go." "I'll get you to the station," Natalie said, throwing on a sweater, shoving her worry into boots. She met Scarlett in the hall with a thermos and a knit hat and the kind of steadiness you perform until it becomes true. On the train platform, Scarlett's hands were restless. Phone, scarf, the copper ring walking her thumb. Natalie took them gently, one in each of her own, and held them still. "You don't have to be brave right now," she said. "I know," Scarlett said, eyes bright as if the snow from last week had decided to live there, "but I am anyway." The train arrived with a yawn of doors. Scarlett tucked her head against Natalie's shoulder for a heartbeat that felt long enough to have seasons, then pulled back and smiled in a way that was all apology and promise. "Watch the croissants," she said, trying for light. "Make sure they don't become narcissists in my absence." "I'll talk them down," Natalie said. "Text me when you can." Scarlett kept in touch in flashes. A selfie on the hospital room couch, hair escaping, it's not. Her father in the background, with a blanket that had seen better decades. Thumb up, a photo of 2 plastic cups of vending machine coffee with, captioned, "The worst and somehow the best." The text that broke Natalie's heart and mended it in the same motion. "He kept asking if I could find the quiet. I told him it's a room we can carry now." Natalie answered with dispatches of her own. A shot of a wall of student self-portraits, all of them strangely triumphant. A video of Mr. Khan from the bodega insisting on wrapping a second bag of oranges for luck, wagging a finger at the camera. A close-up of the chalkboard contract with another line added in her tidy handwriting. "When storms come, we put them in the quiet together." 3 days later. Scarlet came back with shadows under her eyes and the old wooden spoon her father had used when she was small, wrapped in a tea towel in her bag. They met, of course, in the middle of the hall. The hug was one of those long, wordless ones that tells you everything you need to know without a single syllable being required. "He's okay," she said into Natalie's sweater, shaken, settling. The neighbor promised to check daily. "We labeled the calendar big enough to compete with the moon. He made me take the spoon because it knows when things are done." "Wise spoon," Natalie murmured. They went into 3C and made a ceremony of giving the spoon a place, a hook by the stove where it could preside over every simmer. Scarlet stirred onions, slow with it, like gratitude has a smell, and talked about the way her father had laughed at a joke he couldn't quite remember, the way he'd fallen asleep mid-sentence holding her hand. "What do we call each other?" Natalie asked later, not coy, just curious, the question making itself comfortable between them. "It feels silly to care about the word, but it also feels like a ribbon I want to tie on the right thing." Scarlet leaned her hip against the counter, the spoon balanced like a baton in her hand. She considered, then smiled. "I like girlfriend," she said. "It's both grown and gleeful." Girlfriend, Natalie tried on, and the word fit like one of Scarlet's sweaters, soft, a little oversized, but exactly right. "Okay, I like it, too." They found small ways to say it to each other in the week that followed, not as proof, but as pleasure. Scarlet texted, "Girlfriend, the basil is plotting a coup. Do you have anti-herb strategies?" Natalie replied, "Girlfriend, deploy pizza." At night, they traded sides of the hallway like it was a polite dance. Some evenings they fell asleep on Scarlet's couch under a shared blanket, while a French movie murmured in subtitles to the plants. Some mornings Natalie woke in her own bed, with a text already there. "There's a blueberry muffin on your mat and it's judging me for not letting it cool before I stole its sibling." The first clear night after the snow and the storm and the train, they went to the roof with 2 thermoses and a bag of clementines. The city had shaken itself dry. Windows glittered like an orchestra, not a shout among them. Their breath ribboned in the sharp air. "I brought an amendment," Natalie said, producing a folded paper from her pocket. She'd drawn the lines straight, even though she'd done it on the subway. Her teacher's handwriting neatly listing, rooftop contract addendum, spare key, privileges for emergency soup and or loneliness, permission to knock without reason, always keep a chair in the quiet for the other person's. Scarlet read, and then, without comment, pulled a small key from her pocket, tied to a loop of red thread. "Beat you to it," she said, almost shy. "Only if you want it." Natalie opened her palm and let the key settle there. It was warm from Scarlet's pocket, from Scarlet herself. "I want it," she said simply, and handed over her own, gold and dull with the ordinary romance of use. They pressed the keys into each other's hands like vows they were capable of keeping. Then they sat, ankles knocking, thermoses cupped, peeling citrus with careful thumbs. They passed segments back and forth without counting. "You know," Scarlet said after a while, mid-peel, "when the power went out that first night and you knocked on my door, I had this ridiculous thought." "Tell me," Natalie said. "I thought, if she comes in, the apartment will belong to her a little. And part of me was scared of that. And part of me, most of me, was relief, like the room had been waiting for the right person to cross the threshold and say something honest." Natalie smiled, feeling that bright, steady thing again, the recognition that had started like a flicker and grown into a flame no one needed to shield. "I didn't know it then," she said, "but I was looking for the quiet, too." They sat with the city spread below them, an invitation, a heartbeat, a map. The wind picked at their hair and moved on. Somewhere, a dog told the night a secret. Natalie leaned in and kissed the corner of Scarlet's mouth, then the center, then her laugh. The kiss tasted like citrus in winter, and everything agreeing to grow anyway. When they went back downstairs, the hallway didn't feel like a distance to cross, but an extension of whatever room they entered. Scarlet's kitchen with the spoon careful on its hook. Natalie's living room with the plant she'd finally stopped apologizing to, for forgetting to water it once in July. They paused between doorways, as they always did. "I'll see you at breakfast," Scarlet said. "I'll see you," Natalie answered, and left her door ajar without thinking. It stayed that way, sometimes a crack, sometimes swung wide, sometimes closed with a key that now lived on the same loop as another. And the building went on talking. And Mr. Khan continued to press fruit into Natalie's hands like benedictions, and the croissants modestly kept their integrity with only occasional pep talks. and when storms came, as storms do, they put them in the quiet together on rooftops, in kitchens, in the thin slice of hallway between 3B and 3C, where the air had learned their names, and watched, the way you watch bread, for the moment when everything softens and rises and is ready for the heat that will make it whole. Winter loosened its grip like a hand unclenching finger by stiff finger. Snow turned to seams of water along the curb, then to the shine that dries to a memory. The radiators calmed down. On Saturdays the market returned with shy greens and jars of jam that pretended not to be summer. Mr. Khan swapped citrus pyramids for early strawberries and insisted Natalie take one more basket for art, which she assured him was a legitimate field that welcomed edible donations. On a morning that smelled of wet pavement and beginnings, Natalie woke to a text and a photo. Scarlet cinnamon, do you trust lemon zest in the strawberry galette, or are we fighting destiny again? Photo, a countertop like a small, sweet, topographical Maparise, sugar, a lemon surrendered to its own brightness. Natalie, I trust you with any destiny involving butter. Across the hall, a door clicked. They met in the middle, the way they always did when time allowed, drawn to the little country. Between 3B and 3C, where the light was always a fraction softer than it had any right to be, the kiss was quick and accustomed and still, somehow, an excellent surprise. Come taste summer, pretending to be punctual, Scarlett said, voice still sandpapery from sleep. They baked with the windows cracked, the stairwell filling with the kind of smell that makes strangers behave themselves. Scarlett's copper ring flashed when she said. Natalie leaned against the counter and told her about the grant that had landed in her inbox overnight, a summer mural on the side of the school. Community volunteers, kids invited to paint a sky that belonged to them. They picked your proposal, Scarlett said, eyes bright as the lemon in her hands. Of course they did. What's the theme? Neighborhood constellations, Natalie said, half embarrassed, wholly proud. We're going to map the things that hold us together, and fire escapes, and the laundromat where Ms. Rivera always remembers quarters for everyone. Scarlett's grin widened. I'll bring snacks for the galaxy. The weeks ran warm and busy. Scarlett rose before sun and came home dusted in proof and burnished by ovens. Natalie drafted stars on paper and then on cinder block, measured and taped and coaxed kids into believing that a brush in their hand could be a compass. They exchanged sweaty, delighted pictures at odd hours, Scarlett under a mountain of baguettes, Natalie knee-deep in paint splatters with a child photobombing behind her, hands both upraised and deeply blue. One Sunday, Scarlett said, he wants to come, as if the idea had just grown a voice. Dad, he keeps asking about the mural. Says he wants to see the stars while he still remembers which ones are real. Of course, Natalie said at once, and she meant it with her whole breath. I'll ask the volunteers to save him the best chair. We'll put him in the shade and ply him with cold lemonade until he's sick of me. Scarlett laughed and then hung that laugh carefully in the air, a decoration she could return to later. He has good days, she said, even better ones. He arrived in a cardigan that had outlasted 3 apartments and a smile that made lines and light compete. Across his face, in the sun-washed schoolyard, Natalie introduced him to the 5th graders. This is Mr. Vale, official mural inspector, and he took the title with ceremony, tapping the spoon handle that peeked from his tote like a talisman. The spoon knows when things are done, he told a skeptical 9-year-old. Double quotes, sir. Does it know when murals are done? The kid shot back. It might, he said, satisfied, if someone tells it what to look for. They painted slow, and they talked slower. Scarlett's father recounted a story about a pie contest that had almost been a scandal and ended in a potluck. He forgot a detail mid-sentence and recovered it later like a dropped stitch. When the afternoon tipped toward gold, he sat under the elm and watched his daughter move through the crowd, her competence a kind of wind. He tugged Natalie's sleeve when she passed. You found the quiet, he said, almost conspiratorially, as if we were all sneaking around in a library. Thank you for carrying some of it for her. I'm just holding my corner, Natalie said, overwhelmed and steady at once. Not every day cooperated. The bakery's landlord announced renovations that somehow meant Scarlett had to bake twice, the product in half the space for a week. Natalie's principal decided the mural reveal should coincide with a board visit, layering urgency on something that was supposed to feel like play. There were mornings they waved from doorways, because waving was all time allowed. There were evenings they fell asleep with their feet touching because that was as much as their brains could organize. The week before the reveal, the schedules collided like skaters who loved each other and still, somehow, crashed. Scarlett set a tasting for the same Saturday after a vendor pulled out of the shop lineup. Natalie needed to finalize the last section before the scaffolding went back to whoever owned Tall Things. "I can move the tasting," Scarlett said, tired fingers in her hair. "I can make it Sunday." "You can't," Natalie said, kinder than the words could possibly sound, and they both knew it. "People are expecting you," they ordered. "It's work. And your work is a wall that the whole neighborhood will look at every day for a decade," Scarlett replied, as if there were a unit of measure for pride. "I should be there." "We can't be in two places," Natalie said softly. They fell quiet in that way that isn't the quiet you build together, but the kind that arrives like weather. Natalie's throat did the brief ache it did when she had to disappoint any of her fifth graders, which embarrassed her in the moment. Scarlett's shoulders lifted, a long, small breath climbing them without help. She said the wrong thing first. "It's just a wall." And Natalie, foolishly, said a wrong thing back. "They're just pastries." They looked at each other like two people suddenly on opposite sides of the same small room. "I don't think that," Scarlett said immediately, as if she could seize the words before they broke anything. "I'm sorry. I know," Natalie said, penitent in the same breath. "I don't think that either. I'm tired." "So am I," Scarlett said. Her laugh was brief, and not particularly amused. "I'm going to the roof," she added. "Not to leave, to breathe." "Okay," Natalie said. They found each other 5 minutes later at the parapet, the wind undoing whatever their words had just attempted. The city was its indifferent, gorgeous self. The mural rose like an idea, in the near distance, still raw at the edges, still hungry for polish. Scarlett didn't reach for Natalie's hand right away. She put her palms flat on the stone, as if the roof needed to know she meant no harm. "I want to be there for everything you love," she said finally. "Which is impossible, and also what I want." "Me too," Natalie said. "And I am human, and get sharp when the impossible resists logic." "Let's do this like decent bakers and teachers," Scarlett said, managing a smile. "Let's set terms." They wrote an addendum right there on Natalie's folded grocery list. The pencil dull and obliging. "Rooftop contract, a busy week amendment when calendars collide. We forgive the physics, we send a proxy, a slice, a photo, a voice message that says wish you were here, because we do. We meet in the middle, after, with something sweet and something salty, and that's what they did." On Saturday morning, Scarlett texted a picture of the pastry table, the galettes like concentric galaxies, the croissants composed despite adrenaline, under it, a voice note or laugh, the smile in it clear, even without a face. "Wish you were here." At noon, Natalie sent a panorama of the wall kids with painty hands, grandparents claiming the bench. The top corner of the sky blooming with constellations that were actually grocery carts, and a pigeon with aspirations. Under it, her voice, "Wish you were here." They met that evening on the roof with fries and a wedge of leftover galette, and sat in the comfortable, earned tiredness that follows a day done right. The mural twined night into itself. The bakery closed, its glass catching stray stars. "Your dad came?" Natalie asked. "He did," Scarlett said. "He walked up to someone he didn't know, and told them. That one there painted my girl into the sky. He meant you, I think." "I hope he meant both of us," Natalie said. "You baked the stars." "I'll take that," Scarlett said, leaning into Natalie's shoulder. "Also, the board cried. Mr. Khan cried. I'm pretty sure the pigeon cried." "He did," Natalie said. "He told me privately." Spring slid into its generous self. Scarlett began to leave a spare sweatshirt on the hook by Natalie's door. Without comment, Natalie's sketchbook took up a permanent residence on Scarlett's coffee table. One evening Natalie opened 3C and found a new jar on the counter. Flour, 3B pancake emergency. She laughed until she had to lean on the sink. They traveled upstate one Sunday to eat pancakes with Scarlett's father and to hang the wooden spoon in its second place of honor on the wall above his stove. In the afternoon light of his kitchen, he called Natalie by the wrong name once, and then corrected himself so gently it felt like a blessing. Before they left, he pressed their hands together and, with the authority of someone who had cooked for a long time, said, "Don't let the pan get too hot. Butter burns if you rush it." Back in the city, the air turned honeyed with longer days. The basil on Scarlett's windowsill attempted an empire. Natalie's fifth graders drew summer planning charts that were 70% pool and 30% snacks. The hallway between 3B and 3C remained their small sovereign state, its borders friendly, its laws simple. On a Tuesday that had no reason to be special, and was anyway, Scarlett unlocked 3B with her key to drop off a bag of cherries, and found Natalie arranging her bookshelf into something that made her heart feel seen. Half an hour later, Natalie walked into 3 Celsius and found her own mug blue, chipped, beloved hanging on a little hook by the stove, a card above it with the doodle of a star. "Does this mean we live in 2 apartments with 1 kitchen?" Natalie asked, delighted. "I thought it meant we were grown-ups with a mug system," Scarlett said solemnly, then couldn't help it. She smiled. "But yes, also that night, they wrote another amendment on the chalkboard, laughing at how long the contract had gotten, how the plant leaves seemed to lean in to read, drawer sharing is a recognized milestone. Some mornings belong to both of us even if we're not in the same room whenever possible. We wake each other with coffee, or light morning complied." It came through both sets of blinds, brushed to faces, made both refrigerators hum. It found them, as mornings had a habit of doing now, sometimes tangled on a couch, sometimes halfway between doorways, sometimes a flight of stairs up, watching the city be its implacable, beautiful self. They learned the names of their neighbors and invented names for the pigeons. They missed what they had to miss and celebrated what they could show up for. When storms presented themselves in whatever shape calendar, whether memory, they carried them upstairs, or into the kitchen, or into the thin space between 3B and 3C that had long since stopped feeling like a hallway and started feeling like the quiet they had built. And on the kind of morning that could have been any morning, Natalie walked into 3C balancing 2 coffees and found Scarlett in a sweater that had made its own case for adoption. "Good morning," Natalie said. "Good morning," Scarlett answered, mouth soft with sleep and something else. "Week's going to be full," she warned, and didn't sound sorry. "We have amendments for that," Natalie said, and handed her a coffee, and kissed her in the doorway where everything had started, and where, as it turned out, everything kept starting, again and again. Mornings they would keep and keep and keep. Loving Natalie and Scarlett's Cozy Neighbors 2 Lovers Journey. Subscribe, like, share, and comment to keep the stories going.